Welcome from San Diego, California. We are reaching you in English, Spanish, and Portuguese, live through a unique and complex international telecommunications network via satellite, microwave, and cable. The International Training Center at San Diego State University brings us together once again through this original video conference program, which joins distinguished organizations representing education, business, and government in Mexico, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, Panama, Colombia, Venezuela, Peru, Ecuador, Brazil, Bolivia, Paraguay, Argentina, Spain, and the United States of America. We acknowledge the participation of the Organization of American States in Washington, D.C., and the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, known as UNCTAD, in Geneva, Switzerland. Distinguished experts join us today to examine the topic Creativity and Vision, a formula for optimal performance. This is the 10th video conference of the year 2000 series on global strategies for excellence, value, and optimal performance. My name is Richard Page. I am an attorney in private practice with the Page firm in San Diego, rendering services in the areas of international litigation, arbitration, and mediation. Today's program will be composed of 2 presentation modules and 2 question and answer sessions. We look forward to your live participation. The uncertainties of a new millennium and a globalized environment place creativity at the heart of any successful effort to visualize our future. Creativity in practice requires the application of a broad systemic approach to assess possible and preferred outcomes and the mastery of an intuition process to maximize foresight. This innovative video conference will review the systems approach as applied to visioning and the hows of an intuition program at different levels of an organization. The invited speakers, Mr. Thomas L. Hoffmann and Dr. Roger Frantz, will provide practical examples of strategic visioning projects, grading their level of creativity and resulting effectiveness. Mr. Thomas Hoffmann is the founding partner of Essential Experiences Associates, known as EXA, a management consulting firm focused in helping Fortune 500 companies understand those organizational characteristics which will lead to higher levels of employee contribution, performance, and satisfaction. Since 1996, Mr. Hoffmann has worked with companies in North America, Latin America, Europe, Asia, and the South Pacific. Originally from Wisconsin, Mr. Hoffmann began his career at AT&T in 1970 and spent 26 years in line sales, operations, and corporate staff positions. From 1989 to 1991, Mr. Hoffmann was Administrative Director of Quality for AT&T's Western region. He served as a certified senior evaluator for the Malcolm Baldrige Award criteria for the period 1990 to 1993. He also has been a guest professor at Estonia Business School in Tallinn, Estonia, since 1992. Dr. Roger Frantz joined the faculty at San Diego State University as professor of economics in 1978 and is the director of the annual Intuition 2000 conference held through the university's College of Extended Studies. He has held workshops on intuition for over 10 years. His interest in the field began when he started a daily meditation practice in 1970. He has worked as a consultant to a number of internationally recognized firms, including Pioneer Electronic Technologies, where he served as an executive coach to upper management. He also works as a consultant for small businesses through the federally funded Small Business Development Center's San Diego branch. Dr. Frantz received his Ph.D. in economics from Washington State University, is co-editor of the book Intuition at Work, Pathways to Unlimited Possibilities, a collection of essays by a number of experts in the field of intuition. Author of the book X Efficiency, Theory, Evidence, and Applications, and co-editor of the Handbook of Behavioral Economics. He has also authored a number of articles dealing with topics from both the fields of economics and that of intuition, which have appeared in various scholarly journals and books. Dr. Frantz has appeared as an expert in both of his fields of interest on a number of local radio and television programs. Welcome to you both, and thanks for being with us today. I would like to begin with a question, if I may. You talk about vision and creativity and about intuition as being critical skills in the new millennium. How can I tell whether I have these skills? And how can I identify those same skills in others with whom I work? Dr. Frantz?
Well, if you're human and alive, then you have the skills, because human beings are designed. We are hardwired for these skills. And it's of course, is the same in other people. You could tell if people have understandings of situations without having a lot of specific facts about situations. You could tell if people come up with new and unique ideas, if they make leaps of logic, if they make connections between things without a great deal of facts beforehand. And even if they're not being used, it's like riding a bicycle. You know, once you do it, you've got it, and then you can very quickly pick it up again.
Mr. Hoffmann?
Well, I think it's one of those things that we are all born with. I agree with Dr. Frantz. And that over time we suppress. And so we need to reawaken those skills as we become older and work in the business settings. I would also say that a way of finding out is that we can take assessments, but one of the quickest ways to find out is ask the people who are working for us and with us if they're experiencing any creativity and visioning, as well as our customers. But the good news is, in all of this, is that if we take a systematic approach to understanding our own competencies, we have the chance of developing them and reawakening them and putting them to use in our business experiences.
Thank you for your answers. Let us begin now with Module 1, in which Mr. Hoffmann will talk about the 4 drivers or characteristics of high-tech companies which will result in success.
Many times we look for answers from the professional, the expert, etc. These are valuable resources. However, for vision and creativity to come alive and thrive, I believe you first must know yourself, second, know your people, and third, know your business well. It is in knowing those 3 well where you will find vision. There is where you will find creativity. As a way of exploring this thought, let me share a conversation. A friend of mine left the position of CEO and president of an international company about 18 months ago. Upon his departure, he decided to change the type of work he had engaged in, from leading and managing a company to engaging in buying, selling, and on an exception basis, building select businesses. He began his search first by investigating what was happening in his local market area. He knew the local market was predominantly comprised of petroleum companies, and the community population base was predominantly comprised of highly educated engineers. What he was surprised to learn was how many of them had left the large petroleum-based firms to found new small high-tech companies. His mid-sized city had become another Silicon Alley. Or, since he lives in the western plains of North America, I jokingly suggested Silicon Gulch. Secondly, he became associated with the venture capitalists in his home city. This provided 2 data points for his plan. First, he could learn what investment opportunities existed, what potential companies he could buy or sell, and second, to meet in depth, at least on paper, prospective companies. In a very short time, he found himself being sought after by multiple startup and fast-growing companies, not for his investment money, but for his leadership and management advice on how to run their businesses. This was a role he had not intended. However, this unexpected outcome provided him greater access to identify the drivers being used by a particular company to survive and achieve long-term financial success. During the past year, he had the chance to become closely associated with about 35 companies and has been following their business progress. Some of the companies are new upstarts. Some have been in business for many years. Some are small, 20 to 75 employees, and some are quite large, 600 to 700 employees. When I recently visited with him about his observations, he replied, "Based on my experience with these companies, I have come to the point that when I walk into a company, I can sense in about an hour whether the company will more than likely fail, will continue along for years being mildly financially successful, or will be very successful." A bit surprised at his boldness, I asked what he felt were the key drivers. Again, he very confidently replied, "At first, I thought those destined to be winners would have the best new technology. But I know that is not the most important. What I find is that in those companies that are destined to be winners, there are 4 things. 1, that the leaders have highly developed people skills. 2, that the vision is absolutely clear and shared, and everyone is personally committed to making it reality. 3, that without question, everyone in the business knows, understands, and lives their core beliefs and values. And 4, that the company has clear, brief, and creative strategies." Briefly, the leaders know themselves well, they know their people well, and they certainly understand their business. As we discussed my friend's observations, it became clear that the catalyst tying all the elements together in the companies destined to be winners long term was the leaders' people skills. As our discussion progressed, it reminded me of the critical work that Dr. Daniel Goleman has undertaken the past few years around emotional intelligence, known as EI, or sometimes measured as emotional quotient, EQ. Through his research and the assemblage of research by others, Dr. Goleman challenges the common belief that leaders are successful because they have superior intellectual ability, measured as intelligent quotient, or IQ. What he and others first found, based upon research conducted in the 1980s, was that people's IQ tests, when correlated with how well they performed in their careers, IQ accounted for about 25% of job success. However, when the research was reconducted in the 1990s, they found that at best, IQ may only account for about 10% of job success. However, among leadership positions, they found the correlation to be closer to 4%. This may not be as surprising as you might first think if you reflect upon your own experience. The price of entry into most positions today requires a high level of IQ, especially for leadership positions. So what Dr. Goleman demonstrates is that somewhere between 90 and 96% of the success of a leader is based upon their emotional intelligence. Let me give you a brief background. Dr. Goleman suggests emotional intelligence determines one's potential for learning the practical skills that are based on its 5 dimensions, namely self-awareness, motivation, self-regulation, empathy, and adeptness in relationships. One's emotional competence is a learned capability based on one's emotional intelligence. 2 important notes for our brief discussion of the subject. First, emotional competence can be learned and developed. And second, each of us has emotional competencies that may be highly developed or may not be appropriate for the job. Our challenge is to know ourselves well enough to master learning those competencies. Dr. Goleman lists 25 emotional competencies that fall under the 5 main dimensions of emotional intelligence. If assessed, each of us would have a profile of our strengths and limits. Outstanding performance requires we only have strengths in typically 6 or so competencies that are spread across all 5 dimensions of emotional intelligence. Comparing mediocre leaders and the best, Dr. Goleman observes that the best leaders have significantly greater strengths in influence, team leadership, political awareness, self-confidence, and achievement drive. Let's briefly review Dr. Goleman's definitions of these differentiating competencies. As we do, ask yourself, how well do I know my current level of proficiency in this dimension? How much more effective could I be if I understood myself more in this dimension? The common leadership competency definitions, according to Dr. Goleman, are in influence, quote, or wielding effective tactics for persuasion. This competency falls under the dimension of social skills. People with this competency are skilled at winning people over. They modify their presentations to appeal to the listener. They use complex strategies to build consensus and support. And they orchestrate dramatic events to effectively make a point. Team leadership, or creating group synergy and pursuing collective goals, is the next of Goleman's leadership competency definitions. This competency falls under the dimension of social skills. People with this competency model team qualities like respect, helpfulness and cooperation, draw all members into active and enthusiastic participation, and build team identity and commitment, and protect the group and its reputation and share credit. Next is political awareness, or reading the group's emotional currents and power relationships. This competency falls under the dimension of empathy. People with this competency accurately read key power relationships, detect crucial social networks, understand the forces that shape the views and actions of clients, customers, and competitors, and accurately read organizational and external realities. Self-confidence, or a strong sense of one's self-worth and capabilities, is the next leadership competence. This competency falls under the dimension of self-awareness. People with this competence present themselves with self-assurance, can voice views that are unpopular, and go out on a limb for what is right. They are also decisive and able to make sound decisions despite uncertainties and pressures. The last Goldman leadership competency definition is that of achievement drive, or of striving to improve or meet a standard of excellence. This competency falls under the dimension of motivation. Leaders with this competency are results-oriented, with a high drive to meet their objectives and standards, set challenging goals and take calculated risks, pursue information to reduce uncertainty, and to find ways to do better and to learn how to improve their performance. Reflecting on the conversation with my friend, I was struck by the frequency with which he used many of the same words and examples as Dr. Goldman, especially since he was unaware of Dr. Goldman's work. One characteristic of the potentially successful companies was clear. Leaders, first, knew themselves well. As leaders in the public or private sectors, what is your personal competency level in the above dimensions? How proficient do you think you are? What experience are your people having of you? What experience do you think my friend would have if he observed you during a normal workday? Fundamentally, the more we know ourselves, the better equipped we will be to create potentially successful organizations. The second characteristic my friend observed was that the potentially successful companies had a very clear shared vision. It was also clear the vision creation and sharing occurred when the leaders knew their people well. People have an inherent desire to experience movement forward toward something, direction, or to know where they are going. We might recall from previous broadcasts that every company should have a vision. It should be visual, it should be future-oriented, it should describe the ideal, and it should be unique for your company. A vision should generate pull, drawing all in the organization in the same direction, focusing energy and output and achieving the ideal. When I asked my friend what he experienced about vision in those companies that he felt were potentially successful, he began describing the excitement people expressed, excitement of helping create the vision, excitement from their direct role and work connection to the vision, excitement from the sense of contribution, excitement from being a valued player, excitement from being part of a team that is truly focused, excitement from sharing their knowledge and wisdom, excitement from being able to live their values. When he asked, who developed the vision, they replied, we did. Even in the obviously entrepreneur-led companies, people experienced the feeling that they had participated. When he asked, what is the vision? Everyone could articulate it. Identifying and sharing a vision for an organization is the most fundamental aspect of leadership. But identifying and sharing does not mean it is the sole responsibility of the leader to do so. The leader may be the person orchestrating its development. Visions are developed from within and outside an organization. From within is having a deep understanding of the people within the company. And from outside is having a keen understanding of the company's purpose for existing, relationship to its client base, market, community, and social responsibilities. Visions emerge from a clear understanding of who the company is, the company's core beliefs and/or value system, how it developed to where it is today, and the future view of the market. It may be impossible for a leader to know all of those elements well. Hence, leaders must engage their people in the vision development process. And this can be effective only if, as leaders, you know your people well. To do so, in the words of my friend, they must have highly developed people skills. To do so, in the words of Dr. Goldman, they must know their own emotional competencies. In another ITC video conference, Peter Bishop shared with us the power of visions. Visions of political leaders that changed the world community. Visions of religious leaders whose messages have permeated the globe. Visions of entrepreneurs that have changed each of our lives. I have spoken to you before about the role of vision to pull the organization forward and focus all of its divergent energies. And last year, I offered several methods you could use to develop a vision. To continue building on the models I shared with you in previous programs, here's a series of principles or ground rules offered by David Angus, Gary Frank, and Bob Ream to be used when developing organization visions and strategic futures. The principles for running the meetings reinforce the importance of knowing yourself, knowing your people, and knowing your business. They are stated as ground rules for guiding the workshop. First, we believe that the real world is knowable to ordinary people, and their knowledge can be collectively and meaningfully organized. In fact, ordinary people are an extraordinary source of information about the real world. Second, we believe people can create their own future. Third, people want opportunities to engage their heads as well as their hearts and their hands. They want to and are able to join the creative processes of organizations rather than that being the sole domain of the organization's elite. 4, egalitarian participation. Everyone is equal. 5, given the chance, people are much more likely to cooperate than to fight. A task is to structure opportunities to cooperate. 6, the process should empower people to feel more knowledgeable about and in control of the future. And finally, diversity should be appreciated and valued. Give those principles a try. As you do, however, ask yourself what you are thinking and feeling. What concerns do you have? What might you be anxious about starting a meeting with your people using a set of ground rules like these? What is your anxiousness telling you about yourself? What is it telling you about your relationship with your people who will be attending? What might you have to do differently to make the process work? The third observation my friend made was that in potentially successful companies, everyone in the business clearly understood and lived their core beliefs and values. Core beliefs and values are the principles upon which an organization sets the rules of the road or defines the behavior code. Fundamentally, to every company, articulated or not, there is a set of core beliefs and values that are being lived out every day. And whether they are conscious or not, they are the drivers of why clients come to our door, the drivers of why people seek us out for employment, and the drivers of how employees interface with one another during the normal course of daily business. What my friend observed was the potentially successful companies made their core beliefs and values overt. They were formulated and written, they were discussed openly and understood, and they were reinforced and recognized. Their core beliefs and values are the kernel forming the ideal and the unique characteristics of their visions. Understanding organizational core beliefs and values best begins with self-reflection and knowledge. No matter what type of activity we engage in, each of us behaves or functions instinctively based upon our own personal beliefs and values. Without discussing our values, people around us experience them in our behaviors. For example, if one of my values is family, I might organize my work so that I do not miss my son's football game in spite of the current workload. Sometimes we are challenged when we find we have a hierarchy of values where we might have to choose one value over another. For example, two of your values might be family and friendship. There are circumstances that sometimes require I make a choice of one over the other. For example, you might have to choose whether to take a friend to the hospital or go to your son's football game. Then there may be instances where you believe that you have no choice and you must compromise your values. Maybe you work for a boss who values working long hours and you value having a balanced business and personal life. Your boss threatens to give you an unsatisfactory performance evaluation because he does not believe you are committed to the business. Has something similar to this ever occurred to you? How did it feel? What happened to your productivity? What happened to your satisfaction? Like individuals, organizations have core beliefs and values. Organizations are comprised of an aggregate of people that bring their personal values to work with them. The shared core beliefs and values the people then live by create a unique identity for the organization. How those shared beliefs are recognized and rewarded are built into the organization's processes, will in turn create the organization's unique culture. Just as we as individuals experience our personal values through observing our behaviors, people in organizations experience the company's core beliefs and values through the behaviors of its leaders and people, namely through how its leaders behave, how the employees behave with one another, how employees behave with customers, etc. When there is agreement on an understanding of the organization's core beliefs and values, people are free to focus on the work. Energy is released into the system. When there is assumed agreement on core beliefs and values, people hesitate to participate fully, not knowing where clear boundaries exist. Energy is therefore drained from the system. Productivity and creativity are reduced. The challenge leaders have is first to understand the business well enough